for Lutheran education here in Glen Carbon. And just thank you for the opportunity to even think about this sort of thing and to think about the work that you're doing and the way you're growing your church through education. And be with St. James, go out in front of us. If this is a ministry that you want us to be involved in, God, we want you to lead us down that path. But regardless, continue to bless and grow CCLS and their ministry there. We pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Matt Hoehner, who is the director of Christ Community Lutheran School.
Thanks, Pastor. And thanks for coming out today to hear about the concept of a microschool. As mentioned, I'm Matt Hoehner. I serve as executive director for Christ Community Lutheran School over in St. Louis, and working with Will Vann, who is our director of IT over at this school. We've been thinking about this idea of making Lutheran education more accessible and affordable for kids across not only the St. Louis region, but across the country, and looking at how we could do that. So thanks for taking the time to hear about the concept, and any way we can partner to make that happen. I thought it'd be best to give you a little background on who I am before I dive into this concept of a microschool. As mentioned, I'm at Christ Community Lutheran School right now. I started with Christ Community Lutheran School in 2019, the summer of 2019. So I've been there through the wonderful journey through the pandemic, and it's been great to see how God uses opportunities through difficult times to maybe open doors to new ways of learning. But before then, graduated from the seminary in 2002. First call was O'Fallon, Missouri, where I served as a pastor for about 6 years. Then moved to the city of St. Louis. There I served at Messiah Lutheran down on South Grand. And while in the city with 3 young children, I realized the educational need in the city. And so there at Messiah, we started an after-school program for some kids, and then eventually I became the first executive director for Open Sky Education to open up a region of schools in the city. And over the course of about 7.5 years with a national non-for-profit Open Sky, we converted 4 vacant Lutheran school buildings into Eagle schools, which are currently serving kids throughout the region in St. Louis, and then we opened up after-school programs called Compass. So just a little bit of my background. Again, opened up about 4 schools in the south side of St. Louis over those years, and then in 2019 was called to CCLS, where my children are attending, and so I'm blessed to be there currently. While with Open Sky and here at CCLS with Will, my passion has been how can we provide quality Christian education to more kids, and how can we make it accessible and affordable for all kids. And so when I came on the team at CCLS, Will and I, right from the get-go, were talking about different concepts of what we could do. I had learned about the concept of microschools earlier, working with people like Tom Vander Ark from Getting Smart, who travels around the world and looks at different types of schools. I visited a couple micro schools up in the Milwaukee region, and thought it would be a good concept for us to explore as a Lutheran community, considering we have many different facilities, church facilities, where we could potentially try this platform for education. So with that background, let me dive into a little bit about what we're talking about when we're thinking micro schools. So when we think about a CCLS Academy, and that's just the name we're using right now, it's really not about CCLS. It's about how we can get this concept out there with other Lutheran communities and create more of these opportunities. But in a CCLS micro school, our vision is identity. What does a graduate look like? A graduate will be grounded in their identity as children of God, loved and saved by Jesus. Graduates will demonstrate competency in 8th grade standards in preparation for high school. Now that's the assumption that if we opened up a high school, a micro school, we'd be looking at a grade band of 5th through 8th grade. Micro schools could be different grade bands, but that's just kind of where we're starting with this concept. And then graduates will be equipped to be serving leaders in their community. The purpose is to transform lives through Christ-centered education, just as it is for the main campus of CCLS right now. And then in terms of how we do this, or how we would serve our children, learning guides will support and inspire students, grades 5 through 8. And then it would be Christ-centered character-forming, and competency-based personal learning. Okay, so if you want to sum it up, what we're trying to do is the 3 C's. Bring Christ, character, and competency-based personalized learning. Okay? This is kind of an overview of the academic model, or instructional model, if you will. In the morning, we would have Christian character formation. Use a specific program that I helped develop with Open Sky. It's called the Character Formation Project. CCLS has been using it for about 4 years. It's a 4-year scope and sequence of the Bible, and it talks about identity, purpose, and action in each situation. But basically, we would start out, the guides would take the children, and they would gather together across grades, and they would open with a discipleship time, faith time. Pastors and others could join in at that time, just like you would in any other parish ministry. And then we go into the foundational and collaboration time, which is focused instruction on college and career skills. So this is where you get your math, your ELA, reading and writing, and so forth. And we would leverage different online platforms to do that so that the children could grow at their own rate. What I learned in urban education is you have people all across the board, and that's not just in urban, it's everywhere. This is more self-driven and competency-aligned projects to keep the students engaged in their community. And what we want to do is really create lifetime learners in this context. And so with the microschool, don't envision the kids coming down and sitting in rows of desks, but more with the guide being guided to learning stations where they can read and they can get on platforms and learn math and science and social studies. In the afternoon, do project-based learning together with different types of science curricula and so forth. As I mentioned, in terms of character formation, the Christian formation, as part of CCLS, all the children have access to the Character Formation Project. And this is, if you go to the website, My Character Formation Project, you can see what's been built up. But basically, it's a 4-year scope and sequence. It takes you from the Old Testament through Revelation. Each year, you go through the gospel, a gospel, so there's 4 gospels, obviously. And each lesson takes you through identity, purpose, and action. Who is David? What's his purpose? How did he, use courage to take on Goliath? Who are you? What's your purpose? How do you make God known through your actions? And then how do you activate it? A lot of times we have Bible studies and they stop without action. This really guides the students to actually put it into action, that wonderful power that the Holy Spirit works through us. But ultimately, it grounds them in the faith that, their identity as a child of God, loved and saved by Jesus, is a gift of God purely by the gospel. So a lot of times when you see character formation projects across the country, they're words, and it's kind of like be respectful because that's a good thing, and here's an example. This is more driven by the gospel, that you are a child of God. We go back to your identity, start there, then move to purpose, and then finally action. And then right now, media is another platform that we use. It has a lot of different videos, and all Christian-based, Bible studies, leadership development, and so forth. And then, so the school and the families, a part of the school would have access to that as well. We use the NWEA assessment. It's called the MAP, not to be confused with the Missouri MAP. But basically, it's used in over almost 8,000 schools. You can see there, districts across the country and in 140 countries, 8 million students. Bottom line is you have a big sample size to see how the children are growing. So with the NWEA, which we use right now at CCLS, we take it 3 times a year. We take a benchmark in the fall, take it in January, and then also in the spring. And so you can track the growth of learning that you're seeing. And it's not about the assessment, getting the marks. It's about helping the guides or the teachers assess where the children are at so that we can help them grow. Again, acceleration, remediation. And so it's a really good diagnostic tool to understand if there's a skill missing, to reteach that, or whatever it might be. But a guide or a teacher is going to know the broader context of where the children are at. It just helps them create goals and go down a learning path. Daily content. So what are some of the online platforms we're looking at to provide for the children? Khan Academy is one that is used throughout the country, a lot in the micro schools. Raise your hand if you know what Khan Academy is, just so I can get a sense of awareness. So many of you are aware of it, right? So it's free. I think the pandemic has brought it to the forefront a little bit more for more people who are using it, whether it's at school or just homeschooling. But you have the standards there. The children can move at their own pace. And again, this is all aligned to the NWEA. So after they take the assessment, you can take their score on the assessment. It's called a RIT score. You can plug it in, and it just sets up a learning path for each of the children based on that. See, these are the things that automation help us with in education so that the guides can focus on the character formation and the growth of the children. IXL is another platform out there for ELA, and we're looking into the ELA platform. As I mentioned, I used to serve with Open Sky Education. They've created their own ELA platform for micro schools, so we'll be exploring that as well. But there'll be some type of online engagement for ELA and reading, social studies as well. And then FOSS Web is a type of science curricula that we use at CCLS. We've seen great outcomes using it, and we have some things already built internally with it. So we're leaning towards using FOSS for science. A lot of project-based learning with this curriculum. And then, of course, character formation project, not only with religion, but there's also a public side or a civic side built into it with American history. So we can pull from that as well to help the kids grow in their knowledge. Enrichment, along with the core classes, we're thinking about providing a number of different enrichment classes, such as health, art, music, language is Duolingo, would be online, and then coding. When it says CCLS Online, we're exploring actually live streaming some of our classes. So for example, if the micro school at 1 o'clock wanted to join the art class at CCLS, we could potentially live stream it, have the materials here, and the students could do the same projects that are being done on our main campus. That's something we've been exploring. We've also explored with Grand Canyon University down in Phoenix, Arizona, the idea of actually building out our own online courses, but that'll be a future project. In terms of staffing, what this looks like is, a maximum of 30 children across grade bands. And to serve those children, you'd have 2 guides part-time. Each would work 29 hours a week, 58 hours total. And then the hours would be like 8 to 12:30, and then 11 to 3:30. So it's 2 part-time people, one person coming in the morning, they overlap, another person in the afternoon, to guide the children. And I think one of the main mind shifts you have to think about is this is not a teacher doing all the lesson plans of every class. These are guides directing the children in their instruction using online platforms. So it's a little bit of unpacking there to understand that. But they'd have about 6.5 hours a week just to do planning to make sure everything was in place and so forth. And obviously a lot of preparation before the school year to get set up for this structure. In addition to that, we've put in our model 2 additional aides to be there as adults to work with the guide. These are people who are there to help with, just shepherd the children back and forth to the different areas and to support the other person. And obviously from a safety standpoint, you want 2 adults in the room. Core competency, we're looking for people who are hungry, humble, and smart, which is basically they have a desire to create this new model and serve kids with Christ-centered education. Humble simply means teachable. There's going to be a lot of learning involved here, and we can lean on people who have done it before. People are doing it now, and we need to be open to suggestions. And then smart is simply skilled with working with children, working with technology, and education, of course, would be a great asset in this situation. Educational background would be preferred. Christian mission alignment is non-negotiable. It has to be there. We're looking to scale Lutheran education, not just an educational platform. There are many people doing micro schools across the country, so our goal is not just to create micro schools, but to create Lutheran micro schools, so we can increase the capacity to serve more children with Lutheran education. And again, we're starting with the idea of 5th through 8th grade grade band, but we're looking at different grade bands as well for these micro schools. Now, why is CCLS even involved? Because in my experience, I've seen how when you have an operational platform, you can scale and serve more kids and open more schools. For example, if Will and I wanted to start our own micro school, he could take the afternoon, I could take the morning, but we would have to figure out, okay, what about tuition? Who's going to do that? Who's going to collect that? And what about HR and all that goes into HR to hiring staff and all that? And by the time we got done with the business side of it, we probably wouldn't have a lot of capacity to do the fun side of instruction. And I've seen so many young, incredible educational leaders with a passion to provide great education for kids go in and try to create their own school, and the business side overwhelms and really takes them off of their passion. CCLS is a school serving over 700 children right now on 4 campuses with an operational platform that you don't usually see in Lutheran schools across the country. What I mean by that is we have a full-time financial director who's a CPA. We have an HR director full-time. We have a communications director. All these things that schools need. But again, if you're going to do it on a small micro scale, where is all of this going to come from? You can't expect the instructor to do it all, right? And that's where CCLS believes that we can leverage some of these gifts that God has given us to serve more communities and to help other schools grow and start. So in terms of administration, we could provide that. We have principals at each one of our sites. They can lean in. I myself as executive director would definitely be a part of the creation of schools. Accreditation, CCLS in 2018 had the highest accreditation score in the country from the National Lutheran School Association. And I can talk about that because I wasn't there when it happened. Jonathan Butterfield was executive director, and he and Will and the team did a great job. And so we have an incredible organization right now at CCLS due to their diligence in the past. And that's something we could share out, especially when you think about attracting families to a micro school. Well, why come to this? Why should we trust this micro school? Well, you'd be connected to an organization that's demonstrated success in education. Human resources, staffing, hiring, management, professional development. We've built out our systems over the last year so that we could support other organizations like this. So using, I won't get into all the systems, but Paycor and Blackbaud and different things like that. Our student information system, those systems are all set up so we could incorporate micro schools into our larger organization. IT support with Will's support. You probably know Will's skills already, but for us to have someone like Will who can go into a building and tell us exactly what we need from a tech side to run this in a proficient manner is awesome. It's a gift from God. And marketing, digital marketing is something we do. So it'd be something that we could easily employ in this community using digital marketing on Facebook and such to get the word out about the school. And other ways of marketing, including our website. We could take our micro schools and just put them on the website. So again, if Will and I were creating our own, we'd have to think about how we create our own website to get the word out so people at a base camp they could come find us at. With CCLS, we can just add that on to our current website to get the word out. Student information system I already mentioned, and then unlimited access to CCLS online resources. So there's just an economy as a scale. And when you have an organization like CCLS and we can use a lot of our systems to serve these smaller micro schools without each school having to go out and set up their own contract for various things. I'll give you an example. GoGuardian is one that we use to protect our kids on Chromebooks. So with GoGuardian, the teachers always know what the children are doing on their Chromebooks, and we can track everything. We get flagged if anything is triggered as inappropriate. And it's also a system that the parents can use as well to protect their kids and know what's on the Chromebooks. that's something that CCLS has a contract with Go Guardian. We can extend that out to other micro schools at a much more affordable way. Okay. And then that would be the operations managed by CCLS. And then we're looking for partners, and we've talked to a couple different partners, some in the St. Louis area. I've talked to people in different states even that are interested in this idea. Some of the synodical leaders are looking at this as, is this the future for Lutheran education in some of our urban areas and some of the rural areas? But the site partner, what we're looking for is a partner who can come alongside and help us recruit the students, because it's not our community. Okay, so if we're going to scale in different places that we don't live in, we need the people in the community to talk around and gather the children, help us gather the children. Obviously, there'll be some marketing campaign with it. Teacher recruiting. I spent my life in missions, my doctorate's in multicultural leadership, and I know that you need leaders to come from the community. So the ideal is to have the guides coming from the community that you're serving. So that would be something we would, lean on our partners, the churches, to help us with. Facility standards. Obviously, we would be using facilities of our partners. For example, in St. James, if we used like downstairs, that would be a facility. We would want to make sure it's maintained well, and you all do a great job. We were able to tour it a while ago. But obviously, we want to keep a good connection there with the facilities. And then mission alignment. Again, I have no interest in scaling just micro schools across the nation because other people are doing it. I want to scale Lutheran education and see if this micro school concept can work for us as well, and then scale that. So here's our website if you'd like to learn more about CCLS. I did bring a handout. I don't know if you all received it, but there's handouts here. But if you go to our website, you can learn more about the main campuses. Again, we have 4 campuses. We serve early childhood at all 4 campuses, and then K through 8 at 2 of the campuses. About 415 students this year, K through 8. And again, I guess in sum, to talk about this isn't about CCLS. I've told Pastor that right away when we were talking about this. I mean, the name means nothing to me. The service means everything. The why behind this, what is simply, our children need to know Jesus as their Savior, and our children need to grow in the full potential that God created them to be. And across the landscape of education in our nation, we can do better for our children. And that's what it's all about, high-quality, Christ-centered education for our children. And thinking outside the box at what other delivery systems might be able to do that. And see where we can partner going forward. So I think the best way to proceed is for me to just pause here and kind of move into a Q&A session. That way, any questions you have, we can try to answer them the best of our ability. Any questions or thoughts? Feedback? Yes, sir. Yeah, the question is, what would the financial commitment be for St. James if St. James partnered in this relationship? Overall, this is a tuition-based model. So I'm going to give a couple assumptions, and I'll get to that. So the assumption is $4,500 per student in the model, okay? And that pays for the model, okay? Your guides, your personnel, all the equipment you need. In that $4,500, the parents get the Chromebook included. Okay, so the Chromebook's included in that model. So some schools you go to, and then there's a Chromebook fee, or you have to bring your own Chromebook. The Chromebook's actually included in that model, just to be clear. CCLS in this situation would be renting space from St. James, and so I just put in the model $5,000. We haven't had any conversations about rent. I just threw out a number. So we would provide $5,000 to use the space to run the micro school. But that's pretty much there's no cost that the church proper has to pay CCLS for this. Now, in the $4,500 per student in the business model, we have built in a management fee, okay? So to pay for all the stuff that we do, we have to have something. And so we did build in a management fee, but that doesn't come from the church, it comes from tuition. Yes?
So what do you do as far as church is
So so currently the way we have it set up, again, we're in 4 different church properties right now, currently, CCLS is, and we don't own any of them. So the way it's set up is the church maintains the cleaning and so forth, and that would be something we'd have to look at and say, is there additional cleaning that needs to take place? Does the rent amount cover that, or do we need to do something there to adjust accordingly? But we would assume that someone would be cleaning from here. It's just easier for the church to maintain that. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
At the beginning, you mentioned one of the goals of the microschool model is to make Lutheran education more accessible to people. So can you talk to me more about what makes this model more accessible?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it is, the question is, how does this model make Lutheran education more accessible and affordable? Well, it makes it more accessible because it's created to go into spaces where there, in some places, you don't have Lutheran education. I know you have Lutheran schools around here, but again, from our vantage point, we're looking at putting it in a lot of different places. So my friend down in southern Illinois or southern Missouri who doesn't have a Lutheran school, that might be an option there, right? So that speaks to accessibility. Also in urban areas where we used to have 23 Lutheran schools in St. Louis, we have 2 now. So that would speak to the accessibility. Affordability, $4,500 is lower than the average community or congregational rate in the St. Louis area right now. So it's actually more affordable. And we would be looking for scholarships and different things that would offset that as well. The cost of education is roughly around $8,000 per student. If you look at the state, and I know Missouri, I don't know Illinois as well, but in Missouri, your public schools get about $8,300, $8,500 from the state, and then local tax money, who knows, like Kirkwood's $12,000, Clayton's $19,000. So if you consider all that, if we're able to provide high quality education and then Lutheran education for $45,000, that's a win. And then, when you think about scalability, going into areas that might have other scholarships or opportunities to pay for that, then it even becomes more affordable.
Along those lines, typically one of the things that makes that possible with this model is having part-time.
Correct.
I'm kind of curious to know how does this model sort of offset the downsides of working with part-time individuals that aren't getting full-time pay and full-time benefits, turnover and things like that. How
Yeah.
have you seen kind of success in the micro model of creating consistency with the guides?
Yeah, so the question, if I could sum it up, is with the part-time, with the staffing model using 2 part-time people, what are the advantages and disadvantages of that? And have we seen any advantages to that? A disadvantage being sometimes in part-time employment, you see more turnover. Okay. So what we have to do is we got to step back and look at education in general. And the reality is we have a teacher crisis. We have a very small pool of teachers and leaders in the United States, public or private. Okay. My sister's up at Concordia, Wisconsin. We don't have a lot of graduates coming out of our Concordias anymore every year. 2 or 3 a year. That's not the way it used to be. And we have a lot of people at the age of retirement. So we have to think about education intentionally as we go forward, especially with Lutheran education. One thing that I've seen in my experience is we have a lot of incredible educators at home because they don't want to commit to the full-time hours a teacher takes, to do. I mean, those of you who are teachers, you know what it means. It's all day, right? And then going home and grading and stuff. And to have a family and do that is really tough. And so we have a lot of incredible educators not engaged in education because they want to be home with their kids, pick them up after school, or have a little more time with them, and they kind of feel a little torn there. I believe that we can find a lot of educators in that pool to serve in this model. And this is a mission, right? This micro school model is a mission, and so we're looking for people who are willing to do the mission, People who, a part-time situation where 29 hours sounds good, 6.5 hours of prep time. Our teachers that we ran it by felt like that was appropriate for what we were asking to do. And so I think that it's a win-win for certain people. Is it a win-win for every person? No. But it's a win-win for a lot of people. And I think we can get good quality people to do it. But the reason we're looking at the model this way is because, one, it's a mission, and two, we have a teacher shortage. And we can't just keep building models that assume you have all the teachers in the world and all you have to do is just pay them more. That's just not the reality. The millennial generation, what we're seeing, studies have shown, is they're about 3 years and out in terms of education. And that was my experience in startup urban schools as well. And so we're looking for people who are dedicated from the community with this group of kids. And we will be asking for a commitment from our guides of 3 years, because what you're looking at is basically a startup business, right? And you can't assume a business to make it if there's turnover right away. Now, life happens. If life happens, we'll deal with it. God always deals with it when life happens. But we're really looking for a commitment from our guides of at least 3 years to get the concept and to get the community rolling. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of commitments, is there a commitment in your life that St. James has to make to you all? That's the first part of my question.
Yeah.
The second part is about facilities. It seems like there are other facilities that are already schools, but they may have playground. Is there recess? Do we need to have playground equipment? And what's the liability there?
Yes.
That's a lot of questions.
Okay. So backing up first, is there a commitment to St. James? Does St. James have to commit to a certain amount of years? The answer is right now we haven't even talked that far, but you just heard me say 3 years. I'd love to have a commitment of 3 years. So when I go to funders and different people, I can say, we're going to make it go for 3 years. It's very difficult to say something works or doesn't work in less than 3 years. The relationships you build after 3 years can't be quantified. I can tell you as a pastor, the first couple of years, or after school director or executive director, couple of years, people get to know you. At year 3, you have a whole different relationship, and the community and everything transforms into something new. So I would ask, and it's not in writing and we haven't discussed it, but I would ask for a 3-year commitment at this, just so we can. This is a new thing. We're going to have to tweak some things along the way. It's not going to be perfect out of the gate, so don't get any visions of that. We're going to have to learn along the way, and I think the 3 years is a sufficient time to say, we proved the concept, let's keep going, or we have to adjust something here or there. Yeah. And then you said liability, and you asked about recess and playgrounds. This is all contextualized, right? In a micro school, some micro schools take place in people's homes. Sometimes they take place in all sorts of buildings. There are micro schools on barges in New Orleans learning about an environmental protection. There's micro schools in museums and in zoos. So it really depends on the community around and what you want to provide for the children. You have plenty of space here for recess to go outside, for the kids to get their exercise. You got a beautiful park next door with a pond. I think this is an ideal location to get all that exercise and so forth. I wouldn't envision creating a playground. If the congregation wanted to do that, if that's what we decided in a couple of years, it's possible, but I don't think out of the gate we would just create a big playground. Your question about liability, the way we have it set up now, CCLS would take on additional liability through our insurer, Lutheran Trust. I've talked to Kip Starnes, president of Lutheran Trust, and we're getting some estimates already on what that would look like. It's built in the model. The church would also want to check with your insurance as well and just see what that might look like. Ballpark, 30 kids, you're looking at $1,000 or maybe a little bit more. So we're not talking an extreme amount of money. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Coming into a community that does have several Lutheran schools, how do you guys do marketing and that so it doesn't give the perception that we're trying to take kids from those schools that are currently enrolled in those schools?
Great question. Whenever you go in a community and you have Lutheran schools already, the last thing we want to do is compete with anyone. That's not our position isn't to compete with anyone. The last thing we want is our Lutheran schools in this area to not succeed. We want them to succeed. Okay, anything we can do to support them, we would, right? And I've even said, that's why I said it's not about CCLS, it's about creating a new opportunity. The reality is you have a lot of parents out there, and when it comes to education, it's parents' choice. Parents know their children best, and they know the learning environment that works best for their children. This is a completely different type of learning environment than what our Lutheran schools are providing. Not right or wrong, different though, okay? So it's not about competing, it's about providing a different type of learning environment that some families are looking for. In the pandemic, the market share of people, and I just use that phrase, but the market share of people who are interested in this type of model has grown from about 2 million to 15 million. So we know people are looking for smaller groups now in something like this. And people by necessity have been forced into this. You've probably heard stories where they hire a teacher and they create learning pods in their neighborhood. And so that's what we're providing, a different delivery system in terms of education, still Lutheran, still Christ-centered, some of the same basic principles, but a completely different model. And again, we're here to support Lutheran schools. Like I told Pastor, I said, if the Lutheran schools want to start their own micro schools, Will and I will give them everything we have so that they can do it too. It's not about us, it's about getting more Lutheran education. Mm-hmm.
I have the same question. I don't understand your customer.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we're talking about facility and staff, and I still don't know where you're going to get these. For my $4,500, I can send my child to the Shepherd, right? I can send my child to Trinity, I can send my child to Holy Cross. Why do I want a learning environment that's online with less students as we've seen only a certain select group of students who excel in that area, and many students do much better in a social environment. I don't see, as we struggle with Trinity and Holy Cross and Good Shepherd to even, fill our own schools, where are we going to come up with another 30 customers that want this learning environment for their children?
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, let me clarify. This isn't an online-only platform. And so this isn't the kids come here, they get their Chromebook out, and they just sit in front of their Chromebook all day. That's not what we're describing. So if it came across that way, let me clarify. There are certain parts of it, skill sets, a part of it, where the learning will take part online with a learning platform. But you still have the socialization, you still have a group. One, it's cross grade bands, so 30 kids across 5 grade bands is different than trying to find 30 kids in just 8th grade or just 7th grade. We would do a demographic market research to see, how many students are out there. We would start by going around and taking surveys and meeting with parents and if there's interest in it. I mean, that's something you do anytime you start an organization. But I can tell you, nationwide, there's a lot of families moving in this direction. And for me, the way I grew up, I might have that same perception of like, well, this isn't school. School is, St. John's Lutheran School in West Bend, Wisconsin, and it looks just like this, right? But that's not the way parents are thinking today. And a lot of research is showing that they're looking for new ways and innovative ways to educate their kids. They like small communities. There's safety there. There's personalized learning there. And that's one of the things that people are looking for is, hey, I don't want to put my child in a class where they're going to get the same content just because the teacher's got one, thing to teach. But basically, I want them to teach and either accelerate or remediate for where my child is at. And that's something we're trying to produce through this model. Those are just some of the things. But you're absolutely right. We have to do our market research, our demographics, and have our conversations visible. And it goes back to 3 years. I've opened up 4 schools in the city from scratch. I can tell you, you don't just snap your fingers and they show up. That's not the way this is going to work. There has to be action. I went door to door a lot and just said, hey, build relationships, tell them about it. But it is possible to do this. And like I said, it's happening across the country. A group, you can Google it, but Prenda, they're doing micro schools. They're a little bit more like a homeschool blend of a micro school. but they opened in 2018. They now have 200 schools. So just to give you a sense of scale and interest out there. And microschool is just a delivery system, right? It's kind of like fast food is such a terrible analogy, but sometimes it's just something easy to think about. But I mean, Chick-fil-A is different than, I don't know, pick your other fast food, right? There's all types of fast food. We're just talking about a delivery system, but connecting with those parents who are looking for what we're providing, that's the key. Yeah.
What types of people are successful for this country? What type of trauma-informed training or education if you're doing for your guides or even for your teachers now at CCLS and along those same lines, special education, students that need an IEP or cognitive floor plan, is that conducive?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, what, I'll say children, I think you said families, but children are successful in this model that we've seen, specifically trauma-informed training. What type of trauma-informed training do we at CCLS do and intend to do for these schools and leaders? And then the follow-up was special ed and IEPs, individualized educational plans for those outside the educational sector. So, yeah, all important questions. And the bottom line is every school is there to serve children. Children and parents make the decision what's best for their children, right? And so each model is different. So when it comes to special ed, what we've seen is a Lutheran school that started a semi-micro school within their own school, did it last year, and they saw that even the special ed children actually hit their growth marks. And so in this setting, it actually worked for those children. I'm not going to stand here and give you a blanket statement that says it works for everyone. That would be wrong, right? I mean, so it's something that you would have to fill out for each child, and each parent would have to make the decision. That said, when you talk about trauma-informed training, we do trauma-informed training at CCLS. This year, we talked a lot about anxiety coming out of the pandemic. But even before then, I've done a lot of trauma-informed training with the schools in the city. And I can tell you, a lot of it is, I'm not going to go into trauma-informed training now, but yeah, we do it. And part of managing a classroom is something we're going to be working in professional development with our guides. So it's not just, here's a guide, throw them into a classroom setting and never talk about it. There's Teach Like a Championship with lots of different, Teach Like a Champion with lots of different skills and teaching tools. Trauma-informed training, you think about collaborative problem solving. It's not about just commanding, it's not about conceding, but it's about collaborating around the issue and helping the child understand what the issue is and helping them navigate. Is it a skill or is it a situation that is the thing that's causing the conflict? Okay, so yeah, we're definitely going to have that as part of the professional development. The guides could be looped into CCLS's professional development that takes place at the end of the year, in the beginning of the year. Crisis management would be covered. We have a crisis management plan, and that would also, we'd loop the micro schools in that as well. Does that answer your question? Say again? Oh, IEPs? Yeah, the individual educational plans. We'd have to sit down and look at that, with the guide and make sure that we could meet the requirements of each IEP. And I think, having a good conversation with the parents and saying, okay, these are the requirements. Can we serve that? If it's a one-to-one para, this model isn't built for a one-to-one para. So, I mean, you have extreme cases like that. This model isn't set for that. And like most private schools, you would have to determine what this setting can provide for certain kids depending on the needs.
I was going to speak that I have taught Lutheran schools for 4 years. For most of the places I went, Lutheran schools weren't even having a conversation about IEPs. So the fact that you're willing to entertain it, I think is credit to you guys. IEPs are for public schools only. Like private schools don't have to follow them at all. There's no laws that require you to do that. So you do have a lot more play with parents to do that too, I would think.
Yeah, at our campus, we have people working with children with unique learning strategies. And so we look at the IEPs and we work through them as best we can. Pastor, you want to speak to that? So the question is, has CCLS talked to the area principals of the Lutheran schools? We're not even to that phase yet, to be honest. This is kind of a conversation we're having with your congregation right now to just see if there's any interest. If there's no interest, there's no need to even have the conversation, to be honest. We'd be glad to. I did talk to Dr. Fick of the Southern Illinois District, and they've given our blessing, their blessing to this conversation. So that's pretty much as far as it's gone. But until we really decide that we're all going down this road together, there really doesn't need to be that conversation. But we'd be glad to have it at any time. Like I said, if anyone else wants to do the microschool, we'll give everything we have and go for it. It's not about us. Pastor?
I have talked with the pastors at Good Shepherd and Trinity, both the schools closest to us, and I have talked to the principals, but the pastors were both on board.
Okay.
Very encouraging.
So conversations with pastors have taken place, and people are encouraging conversations about it. Yes?
Why have you chosen 5th to 8th grade here?
5th to 8th grade, Will and I started at 5th and 8th grade, to be honest. That was kind of our lens, right? I think both of us could visualize it a little bit better, especially personalized learning and such. That said, across the country, there are micro schools that do K2. And to be honest, the pandemic has really got us to scratch our head and think about what might be the best, grade band to start with. To your point, who's looking for it? Kindergarten parents. We have a lot of interest in our school for kindergarten. We don't have the seats to meet the need right now. So that's still up there for conversation. But right now we focused on 5th and 8th grade because we had to focus somewhere. Yeah. To do K through 8 obviously is a different type of guide, someone who understands, because in education, K through 3, you're learning to read, and then 3 through 8, you're reading to learn, right? It's a big difference. And kindergartners act a little bit different than 7th graders. We all know that, right? Not good or bad, but just different, right? So, yeah.
I had a similar question. I know when you're setting up the micro school that you chose 5th grade because it's a set group of kids that you can focus on. Have you considered issues with getting students in that are already into a setting? So are you specifically targeting kids who are not in some private school already?
We're just getting the word out and seeing who's interested. But go ahead.
The second question is, are you also not focusing on the younger kids because they need more of that in-person? Like, it's a lot harder to get a kindergarten to learn how to read coming from a device.
Yeah. And again, it's not just device only, but yeah, there's the reality is those of you who've been in educators in primary level, it's just different. It's a whole different, situation. And Will and I have experienced more in middle school, and so when we think through this concept, we've been always thinking through that filter. Again, this happens K2 and K3 across the country. So it's being done. So it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means our starting point last year was middle school.
Surveying the community inside, maybe starting with K3 makes more sense. Is your plan to do like some, schools in St. Louis that start K2, K3, and then they grow grade level each year to allow students that are already in the first with it for the 8th grade? Or would it look more like that student's not transitioning into?
Yeah, and that's, to be all honest, we're in the proof of concept phase with this micro school, okay? So God can take it anywhere he wants, and I've learned in my ministry, you have no idea where God's going to take things. I've talked to people who started schools on the East Coast through Renew a Nation, and they've seen small schools like this create big schools, like you're saying, like all of a sudden, next thing you know, you get momentum and it grows into a full school. I saw this happen across the street from my house in St. Louis with an urban, non-denominational Christian school that started small and boomed. There's all sorts of ways that it can go. We're focused on the grade bands in the micro school, and then I think each community has to contextualize what the next step is after the 3 years. We have no plans to create schools out of micro schools, but again, we're not going to stand in God's way or the community's way that's what they deem is right. We're here to create Lutheran education. Yes. So time frame, we would, in an ideal world, we'd like to have proof of concept micro schools opened up next fall. With the pandemic, there's focus there right now. It's very doable from a timeline standpoint of hiring the staff, preparing the site. So yeah, that would be ideal, but it's not necessary, right? So there's no pressure or urgency on anyone. That's what we would like to see. We're talking to one that potentially is interested like your congregation and wants to know what the next steps are and so forth, a little bit closer to us. And we know there's interest out there in other places. But we're looking to open 1, 2, maybe 3, and really work on it. Have the guides collaborate across the schools, collaborate with some of the other people out there across the nation that are doing it that we know, and really settle in on what works. The cool thing about micro schools is you can change it a lot quicker than you can a big school. Okay, so if something's not working in a big school and you're like, well, we want to change this, change management will tell you second quarter is where I'm talking change management because I need 3/4 of the year to change whatever we're going to change. In a micro school with 2 guides, you can tweak pretty quick. Okay, so we're going to be doing some tweaking and making sure we get it right for the kids and that we serve. Does that help? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You mentioned 2 guides part-time. Did you also mention
2 aides.
So there would be somebody basically morning and afternoon, or
Yeah.
work that out. So it's not just 1 teacher, 30 kids. The goal would be
2 adults.
1 lead guide, also
Yeah.
an aide doing whatever that aide.
Guides in charge of instruction and guidance. The aide is there to help manage the students and support them.
So if you're working in small groups, with guy gets to a group before you got 3 fifth graders, they get busy. He starts the instructor out there, moves around. Once they're going, then the aides can monitor that.
Exactly.
I can only say our children went to Prairie Town. It was a very small school.
Mhm.
30 kids for first to 8th grade.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful family community. We had graders that helped the first graders. And like that instruct one grade students, one to another, they would work, they would assist.
Yeah. Thank you. So the point was, your kids, you said, went to a small school that had 30 kids, and it was a great community, family community, and the instructor just kind of moved on. It really is the one-room schoolhouse back, but leveraged with educational technology to do it in a really effective way. Is what we're talking about?
And I guess I would say that would probably be the downside of child that the kids had the technology while it was still
Mm-hmm.
to have that opportunity of now the technology that's out there and but yet having the support system larger and over everything makes it more feasible.
Yeah. Yeah, so the overall operational platform makes it more feasible for this to happen, and having the technology is a benefit for the kids these days. Correct. A couple other things I'll just throw out there. CCLS has a partnership with the school in Nuremberg, Germany. We just started it last year. Because of the pandemic, their kids were just about to fly over to our school, and they had to turn around. But in the future, we're going to have a situation where they'll fly here, we'll fly there. This Thursday, our 8th graders are going to Zoom with their English class and talk to the German kids. Our 6th graders are pen pals, or 5th graders are pen pals with them right now. These are things that we could incorporate into our micro schools too, because we have these broader relationships through CCLS, and they would be invited to be a part of that as well. Yes.
I think we're going to have a meeting to talk more about this congregation meeting in December. What would our next commitment be? What is our next step? We said, okay, we want to move forward. What would we agree to with that?
What would the next step be if the congregation was interested in moving forward? I think we'd sit down and look at the timeline. I've built out kind of a timeline in general because, again, we're talking to a couple other organizations too. And if everyone felt comfortable with it, I mean, mainly we'd want to nail down the facility arrangement, and again, I have drafts of that already, just to make sure everyone feels comfortable about that, and spell out any other questions that come up along the way. And then with that green light, I'm working with my board separately to say, are we interested in doing this? And I'll be talking to them again in November in 2 weeks, and then December would be kind of like the, okay, we're going to green light this, because we're going to have to invest a little bit in the front end. I will be seeking out grants and such for startups as well. And the main, in terms of the, if you backward map from August, and think about the critical path of this project, the key is finding the guides. The 2 guides are crucial, okay? And that's probably the most urgent thing in this process. I've been a part of school launches that didn't even have a building in December, had the financing done in April, and started construction and flipped the whole building from April to August and opened with 150 students with a full staff. So it's possible. Like, I don't want to, if you've never done schools before, I want you to know that it's possible, but again, it doesn't, you don't click your fingers and it happens. There's action that goes along with it. So to your point, December would be, congregation says, hey, you know, we do want to go down this path. Ask any more specific questions, make sure we have the facility arrangement clear for everyone. Then I can go to my board, and then if we get the green light, then we start moving on the action plan.
So I'm thinking, if we say, yes, let's move forward, then we do the due diligence to see if the, out there, then we have another decision to make after we get that feedback, decide if we want to commit 3 years. We wouldn't be deciding in December, we want to commit for 3 years.
Yeah.
There'd be intermediate steps there.
Yeah, there'd be places, I mean, you get to certain points where you're crossing the Rubicon or whatever you want to call it, right? I think when you hire staff, that's one of those steps where you have to be very intentional about where you're going before you hire staff. And I see that happening in February. So if the congregation said, we want to do this in December, and the CCLS board said, blessed it and said, go for it, you'd have January to do some talking to families and such, and to see if there's some momentum there. Not that you'd have to have 30 kids in January, but you could sense the momentum and so forth, and then work out some of the other details so that when we're hiring staff, we can give them a clearer picture than I'm giving you today. And then when they're on board, then they help build ultimately the school that we're building. And then we get them prepared, and we order all the materials in March so that they're here in August. And then it's just a process of recruiting the 30 children over that time period. Does that help? I mean, I could go into more depth later on the project plan, but yeah, back there, man.
I'm just curious, is there opportunity in your model for extracurricular, music, concerts, band, sports? Is there
Yeah.
a plan for that, or is that just something that these kids would be?
That's going to be contextualized, again, as we think from our perspective of these could be anywhere, right? If they're close to our school, we can incorporate them into our extracurricular sports and band and stuff. This is a little bit of a drive. I'd be surprised if families would drive. I mean, it's only 36 minutes from my house, which is right by CCLS, but I'd be surprised if families were going back and forth and band takes place during the school day for us. But for like a drama to come down, that might not be feasible. But I think what we're thinking is let's contextualize it to each group. Like if a congregation has a music director who's talented and wants to do some music, we could do extracurricular stuff there. I would imagine a Christmas program. If pastor and your elders were open to it, you'd have a Christmas program and the kids would do that, or some type of thing, right? But extracurriculars really have to be contextualized to the space, so I'd have to think about it.
But you're thinking of it with CCLS and not other local schools, and it's over here, you're over
Well,
there.
yeah, if other schools are open to these children playing on their teams, that'd be awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And today with sports, a lot of people are in clubs and select sports anyways. So as you think about the future and where this is going, you can find a lot of the extracurricular activities through other organizations too.
Well, and I also know in the homeschooling program, there is after sports that you can get involved in that. And my daughter, who this year they couldn't COVID, they're homeschooling, but yet they were going to
Yep, great. So there's opportunities for extracurriculars, yeah.
You mentioned how hiring is kind of the most important step and talked about multicultural leadership, local guides. Can you walk us a little bit more through what your hiring process looks like, what you consider in that process, and how involved the church as a facility may be?
How involved, the last part, I'm sorry?
St. James be involved in that hiring?
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously, we want to partner with you as a congregation. You know your community and so forth. If you have potential people who would be interested, this is a unique opportunity in education. So, and God builds us all differently, right? God built me differently than other people. This is an entrepreneurial educational endeavor, if you will. So, if it's someone who's not really good with changing and thinking out of the box, it's probably not going to be a good fit for that person, and I want to put a person like that in that situation because they're going to be frustrated a lot, right? Some of our best teachers are, on the Kobe test, they're fact finders, and they're type A, and everything's got to be just right, and they're amazing. We have a bunch of them at CCLS. But that skill set, that temperament, if you will, might not be best for opening up a micro school and having to change and think about things a lot, right? So I'm just trying to give you a picture of what we'd be looking for. As I mentioned before, someone who's got the desire for Lutheran education, cares about these kids and really wants to get after it. Someone who's humble enough to say, hey, I know that we kind of have to stick with a game plan for 18 months. In the laws of scaling things, you can't just keep changing for the changing's sake. And we can't just say, well, this is the way I would do it, so we're not going to do it this way. We have to kind of we need a collaborative spirit, if you will. And then we need someone who's skilled. Someone who isn't good with computers at all, this probably isn't a good fit because we are going to be leveraging technology a lot. Someone who doesn't like this grade band or that grade band, and that's a grade band we're serving, that's probably not going to be a good fit, right? And again, God creates us all differently. It's not right or wrong. It's just we're going to be looking for a good fit there. Does that help?
Yes, so the ultimate hiring decision, though, is facilitated by CCLS.
Yeah. Because we'll ultimately be going through the HR process and everything with them. And again, and we're, in consultation with the congregation, we're going to want to get the right person. Mm-hmm. I really appreciate the questions and engagement today. I mean, again, this is something we've been thinking about. We've seen it happen across the nation. We'd love to see it happen from a Lutheran context. But if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to us. Will's right here. And, I've got a couple cards, or he can give you my email. Our email's right there. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments or just good feedback. Feedback's great. This is why we're getting out and, letting people hear about the concept, because that's the fastest way to get it to where we want it. Okay? Well, Lord's blessings on your day. Thank you for taking extra time with me. I'll stay after if you have a question offline that you want to ask me. But Lord's blessings to your ministry here at St. James and all the great things that God's doing through you here. Thanks.